How's it going, YouTube? This is Brandon Watson back again with Interview At. And today we'll be discussing a user experience researcher who's looking for a new role and diving into their interview. Specifically in this question, we're talking about customer obsession. This is a great leadership principle from Amazon, and is one really that the whole company was built on. And part of customer obsession is not only understanding what your customers want, but being able to discern and figure out what they might want based on data that you have about them, data that's coming off your applications, data that you get from research, data that you get from your own kind of conversations and divinations from spending time with your customers and really understanding their minds. And so it's not so much about building what they say they want, but figuring out what they, not even sure what they want, giving it to them and having it wow them and amaze them. What's the old Henry Ford quip? If he designed what customers want, they'd get a faster horse instead of a car. So that is really the core of being a great product manager and user researcher with customer obsession, is really discerning what to build and how to think about how to deliver it to them. And this is not just tech, it's any industry where you are trying to build products for your customers and figure out what they need. You really need to get into their mind and obsess over them. And that's really the only way that you're going to be a fantastic leader insofar as showing customer obsession. The candidate today is a very interesting one. She was going for a role as a senior user experience researcher. And she's got a very broad and diverse background in terms of products she's worked on, two-sided marketplaces, maritime products, GIS data, just a fascinating background. And so it was a very interesting interview that we did, and let's just jump into the question. Given that your background is product management and that you're trying to transition into user research, I thought it would be really interesting to start with the following. I'd like to hear about a time where you're able to look around the corner and discover an unmet customer need or delight a customer with something they didn't know they wanted or needed. It could be a new feature or an adjustment to an existing feature, whatever, but something where you discovered something new. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, I've done that quite a few times. I'll talk about the most recent one, and that was the discovery of a need for a risk assessment analytic in the maritime domain. So in my former position, it was with a new space tech company that was a low orbital satellite, cluster of satellites. And we provided intelligence on radio frequency emissions that are emitted here on Earth to, U.S. government as well as international governments. And the maritime domain is kind of like the Wild Wild West. The Earth is covered with 2/3 of water, but the high seas, once you get beyond the EEZ or the economic zones of the countries, then it's really hard to monitor and do control and surveillance on vessels that are traversing the high seas. What are they doing? Are they, engaging in illicit trades? And are they polluting the oceans? What's going on? So I, in my own research, was able to identify factors and patterns that relate to risk of a vessel. So determining whether this vessel that is entering a country's economic zone is going to pose a potential threat while they are in that zone. And particularly, it could be a variety of threats, but we're more so along the lines of illicit trade. And so I was able to identify those factors, the behavior, and work towards creating a risk assessment analytic. There's hundreds of thousands of vessels, and analysts cannot necessarily know which one poses a threat based on their map view of all those that are traversing. They know a little bit of history, but it takes too much work and too much time to go through everything and all that data at one point in time. So with the risk assessment, it was able to identify these vessels very quickly and easily visually. So as well. So that's the most recent time that I've done something of that nature.
Can you give me a little bit more of the specifics around what the actual metric was?
The risk, so it was an algorithm, and it was developed through a variety of data points and as well as data that was collected by our cluster satellites, but it also included data from outside sources as well, which, related to where they've been, who other actors they've interacted with, as well as ownership history and numbers of things that they've engaged in. In terms of metrics, are you asking about KPIs, the success of that analytic?
No, I was just trying to understand the what it was. It was an algorithm that it was pooling all of this data and then generating a threat or not, basically a binary output or some gradient.
Right. It was a multilinear regression algorithm that took on a lot of different data points and sources to generate a score, a risk assessment score, which was then categorized as either low, medium, or high. And then when it came to notifying the analysts, that it was integrated or was being integrated into a platform that I was also working on to develop. And so visually, that platform included, QGIS map based. And so visually, the analyst could, do a filter on risk assessment and look out there and see within his or her EEZ that it was observing which vessels it need to pay closer attention to.
Okay. And so with that, I guess, how do I want to ask this?
So the problems it solved is that it saved time. It saved time of the analyst, and it also increased efficiency and effectiveness in their work.
Yeah, no, I get that. It sounds like, obviously, anytime you have a multivariate problem with tons of data points, for any individual to do it on their own becomes very hard. So obviously you want to automate it. And so especially at the country level, there's varying levels of abilities and whatnot. So that, that the value is clear. What was the process you used to discover this need? I guess that's what I want to get at. What led you to this discovery?
Okay. So what led me to that discovery was predominantly user research as well as market research. So I spoke with maritime domain experts, and then from there, I also spoke with the analysts, the end users. Both.
Do you speak to experts? You mean customers or just like people?
Subject matter experts, SMEs. Subject matter. So my process started that I spoke with subject matter experts, and then from there, I took the knowledge I learned from them and also worked in user interviews with end users, analysts, both here in the U.S. as well as in the Middle East, discovering what their issues and their problems were, as well as what data it is that they rely on and look at. I spoke with a variety of analysts across different agencies as well as different levels of experience, and discovered the sources of data that they utilize and rely on, which was quite varied. And then in addition to that, I relied on market research, kind of distilled quite a few pieces of market research, and then together with all of this knowledge, worked on creating this algorithm.
So looking back, the next question was more about the value, which you've already answered, so I'm just going to skip that. Looking back on it now and knowing what you know now, right? Everything that you learned through the process of building this. What change or changes, I guess, would you have made to that feature to make it even better?
I would continue to identify additional sources of information or data that could feed into it to make it an even more superior algorithm. I think it's a good algorithm where it stands now, but as the domain is a continuously changing domain, it's something that you want to continue to stay abreast on. And so being able to, pinpoint more sources and also identify which sources are decaying in terms of their accuracy, and then to feed that into recalibrating the model, which should be recalibrated anyway on a periodic basis. But keeping building a list of resources on that would be helpful.
Okay, sounds fascinating. Very, very cool. It's a very unique answer to that question. Oftentimes it's like, well, I built this enterprise software that made some IT guys' job easier, or something, things like that. So that was very unique problem space. When answering a question about customer obsession, specifically where you're asked to talk about how you got to a product decision or design decision or feature decision, there's a couple of things that you can do that will really make you stand out as a candidate. A couple of them, the candidate did here, and a couple that she did not, or actually one specifically that she did not. And that's not a knock at all. It's more of a, here's how you can really stand out in an interview. So specifically, she didn't presume any knowledge on the part of the interviewer, and that's really important. Oftentimes you'll come into an interview setting and you'll be talking to an interviewer and you're comfortable with what you're doing day to day. You're talking to your teammates and the people at your company all day long. They know what you do for a living. They know what you're working on. They know all the secret language that you use amongst your teams and all the product names and everything. Don't assume that on the part of someone who's interviewing you. Assume they know nothing. Feel free to ask questions. It's always a good idea to check in and say, do you need more detail on that? Or would you like me to explain more what that is? It gives you an opportunity to check in with them, gives them an opportunity to invest in you and kind of keep asking and leaning in a little bit more, as opposed to you just talking and then leaning further and further back. So that's really important. And so she did a very good job of framing the answer. Now, the question itself was about identifying blind spots and features, building features for those blind spots for a customer. This candidate, in this case, didn't really take me on a journey for how the customer was unlikely to get there by just normal use of the product, and maybe would have discovered the blind spot on their own, or didn't really make it clear how this was a blind spot for the customer. So that's an opportunity to round out the answer a bit more as you're answering questions like this, is demonstrating how much knowledge you have about the customer, both in what you communicate about the customer, but also in how they're using your product, and painting that picture for how the customer was unlikely ever to get to the point where they said, this is what I need. But you, as the one who's customer obsessed, were able to think about what that feature might be and solve a problem that they don't know that they yet have. And that's really, really important here. The other thing here is that when you think about, as an interviewer, I'm going to ask questions, or an interviewer is going to ask questions. They don't know what's proprietary to your business. They don't know what's top secret. They don't know what you can and can't say. And so that's really on you as the candidate. And so it's important for you early on, if you're dealing in products that have a lot of kind of secret information or proprietary information to your company, industry, whatever, to be upfront and just state, hey, there's some things in here that I can't really go that deep into them. So when I get to those points, I'll cut it off and I'll say, hey, look, I'm kind of at the limit of what I can say with regard to my company. The interviewer will respect you for that, obviously, for a couple of reasons. One, you're identifying or making it clear how far you can go and not just leaving them hanging. But two, you're demonstrating that you have loyalty and commitment to the proprietary nature of the information for your company. And you're not just going to go blabbing about, should you come to work at this company, you're not going to be blabbing about what you did there. So that's a really important in kind of building that rapport and trust with the interviewer, but at the same time, establishing yourself as someone of high integrity while delivering your answers about whatever it may be, in this case, customer obsession. As always, I'll make sure that we give you the actual assessment that would have been read into the room at the candidate debrief. And in this case, we're talking about customer obsession. So I'll go ahead and read that. As a candidate seeking a role as a user experience researcher, customer obsession is top of the list of required leadership principles. While we did not spend enough time on the process by which the candidate was running their research, and this miss falls squarely on the shoulders of the interviewer, the discussion we had did expose high degrees of customer empathy, a willingness and humility to seek out information from varied resources, and an ability to synthesize what is known about the customer and their needs, coupled with the research findings to discover new and useful features. So again, that's the assessment I would have read in the room as a hiring manager or a member of the interviewing team. Definitely curious to hear what you guys think, whether or not you think she did a good job, what things you think I missed. Go ahead and leave a comment below, and don't forget to click to subscribe for more content that gives you real analysis of real interviews that will help you get the dream job that you want at Interview At.